Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Newcastle Fans TV. Yes, it is in the title. Real Madrid. I've spoken to Bruno Guimaraes. No, we don't want Real Madrid to speak to Bruno Guimaraes. We want Bruno Guimaraes to beat Newcastle for life. But it is Newcastle Fans TV. We are going to talk all about Bruno Guimaraes. Get your comments throughout this video. Is Bruno Guimaraes too good for Newcastle United right now? Should he be playing for a team, let's be honest, in the Champions League, competing to win the Champions League? We're going to go through his stats. We're going to go through if Bruno Guimaraes is he wasted at Newcastle? That could be a better question because we know how good he is. Let's be brutally honest. But let's go through some of your comments as well because, look, I want you to get involved as well. This is Newcastle Fans TV is all about. So this is what Peter said. I don't know if it is the real Peter Griffin, but if it is, good to have you on the show. Of course, he's not too good for us. With our new owners and the vision of where they want the club to go, they thought Bruno would be a huge part of us going to the next level. Look, he will be. Of course, he will be a huge part of going to the next level. That is no doubt. We know what this ownership wants to do. They want to get to the very top. The big question I'd ask: can Newcastle United afford 3 years, 4 years? Because let's be honest, we sit in fifth place right now. Are Newcastle going to be fifth this time at the end of the season? In my particular opinion, I think it's going to be very, very unlikely. And even if we don't finish fifth, we're not going to be in the Champions League, which is still a crazy, crazy sentence when you put it that way. So for me, Bruno Guimaraes has to be thinking right now, how long do I give Newcastle United? Which is very rare because no player is bigger than a football club. Of course not. However, maybe in certain cases, it might be better for the club in general if Newcastle United maybe let Bruno go in a few years' time if we don't reach our full potential. But again, if you put him on a crazy contract, who knows? PDK says maybe a few years ago, a year ago, he would have done, but no, not now. No. He's not going anywhere. Stapleton says, let's have a look what he says as well. Agree, but he's exactly what we need now and for the future. Of course he is. We've been dying out for a midfielder like this for a long, long time. Everyone has that comparison with Cabaye and Bruno. He's a completely different player at times to Yohan Cabaye. I think he's much better than Yohan Cabaye. I really, really do. You never left a football pitch with Yohan Cabaye playing and gone, wow, he could play for the best team in England. In my particular opinion, he has a real strong case to be playing for Manchester City. I didn't think he could towards the end of last season. I thought maybe that might have been a bit too much of a stretch. But in my opinion, I think that Bruno Guimaraes could and should be a contender to get into that Manchester City midfield if he's at his exceptional best, which he pretty much has shown why he's been in Newcastle. That's how much I rate Bruno Guimaraes. I think he's that good. We're going to obviously get your comments in throughout the evening. I've got some bits and bobs that I want to go through as well with Bruno, because there was a big thing on Sky Sports on Monday Night Football for the Nottingham Forest Aston Villa game, and where there was a lot of different stats, and it just showed Bruno Guimaraes in a real good fashion. And I thought it was a real good chance to actually get this on a video today. Aaron Taylor says we're not a selling club anymore. Bruno is going nowhere. Wow. Newcastle United not a selling club. That's incredible. It's actually incredible if Newcastle aren't a selling club anymore. You always used to think the only non-selling clubs are pretty much Real Madrid and Barcelona because of how good and how big Real Madrid and Barcelona are. But can Newcastle be that in England? Can they be that club where they can't be sold in England? You can't sell them anywhere else in England. You can't really sell them to Real Madrid or Barcelona. And that's what you've got to look at with Bruno Guimaraes. Jay, a big hello to you, Jay, as well. There was a time when he was certainly, in terms of maybe not good enough is too big for Newcastle, or maybe, let's be honest, maybe good enough to play for Real Madrid. But look, also you tell from his interviews, he is here for the project. He is fucking magic. He is fucking magic, Jay, as well. That's the big thing, though, for me, the project. The project for Newcastle. We touched about it before. What is Newcastle's project? They want to be in the Champions League. They want to be winning leagues. They want to be competing. Now, that's all well and good if you're Bruno Guimaraes, Sven Botman, and Alexander Isak. But in terms of Bruno Guimaraes' case, his peak years will be, let's say, 4 years' time, 5 years' time. I think he's 24 right now. So if you think in 4 years' time, when he's 28, nearly 29, that'll be his peak years in his position. Can he afford to be in a position in 3 or 4 years' time to let this project develop under Newcastle and think, I can do everything in my career that I want to do in Newcastle colours. That's what I think that the biggest issue is, because I don't know whether Newcastle can do that. You've got Manchester City, who, of course, an exceptionally good team. I know Liverpool haven't been brilliant, but they've been consistent. You expect them to kind of rediscover their form under Jurgen Klopp. Chelsea aren't going away anytime soon. Arsenal and Spurs are developing. Manchester United, it's Manchester United. I don't want to use that saying from Sky Sports, but this is Manchester United you're talking about, and we'll be talking about Manchester United a little bit later on as well in this video and leading up to the game at Old Trafford on Sunday afternoon. So that will be interesting. They're obviously clubs that Newcastle are going to be competing with from the next few years. How quickly can we catch up and get surpassed some of them? That will be the big question. If you look how good Manchester City and Arsenal, I have to say Arsenal now because they are top of the Premier League, it's going to be difficult to catch them. We'll have to wait and see what happens as well. Darback Design, who knows if he has a release clause? Now that's an interesting one. Get in your comments as well. If Bruno Guimaraes has a release clause, what do you think it is and what would you like it to be? Because if I don't want to sell Bruno Guimaraes on the record, I'm not saying that. I think you're looking at at least over 100 million to even think about it. That's how much he is worth to Newcastle United right now. Newcastle pay £40 million for Bruno Guimaraes. How much is that these days? You know, Jack Grealish went for 100 million and he's barely done anything in Manchester City shirt. I know he's won the Premier League, but in terms of the overall contribution, what has Jack Grealish done in the Manchester City shirt? And he was, what, £100 million? Paul Pogba, £93 million. I know that was a few years ago. Could Newcastle name whatever price they want with Bruno Guimaraes? I think they have a real good case. Let's have a look at some more comments as well. I'm sure Eddie Howe has said in the interview that neither he nor Trippier had clauses in their contracts, relegation or otherwise. I think that was confirmed by Eddie Howe. I think you are right on that one. I think the one thing I would say about that, it just shows what the kind of people they are in terms of Bruno Guimaraes and Kieran Trippier. I think, look, let's be honest. Bruno, if he didn't have a relegation clause, that shows how much of a person he is. He had confidence in his own ability that he wasn't getting relegated. He wasn't going to be a championship football player. Fair play to him. Let's have a look at what we've got so far. Look, the title says Real Madrid has spoken to Bruno. Now, a lot of this can be, behind the scenes in terms of maybe agents talking, in terms of actually having conversations. But Bruno did admit on Saturday, says Real Madrid is the best team in the world. So that is nice when he talked about the conversation. It was just a conversation, but it's nothing, thank God for that, because we don't want to lose him. But I think he could just go into that Real Madrid side. I think he could be the natural progression in terms of if you look at Luka Modric and what he does in the football pitch. I'm not saying he's Luka Modric level, but he could be certainly a player that they'll go, well, he could be the sort of player that we could go learn off him a little bit if you're a Real Madrid fan and take that into Champions League, take that into to La Liga matches as well. He says he wants to, this is the big thing for me, he wants to keep going and he wants to be a legend at Newcastle United. Look, he loves it in Newcastle. We've seen the celebrations on Saturday against Brentford. We've seen the celebrations against Leicester, against Arsenal, against Southampton. We've been there, we've seen that. So he does love it in a black and white shirt. I just think we have to make sure, if we want to keep a hold of him, we need to be in a certain position in 2 years' time. I think that's what the max he'll be looking at. If Newcastle aren't on the cusp of a Champions League place in 2 years' time, I think we potentially do lose him in the long run. I think that's how much of an issue it is for Newcastle. We're talking about, in terms of the money side of things, a really good point here. Coutinho, £140 million. £140 million. That's mental when you think about it. And obviously, he's not really performing in an Aston Villa shirt. I know this is when he went to Barcelona, but £140 million. Wow, it's absolutely mental. It really is mental. This is an interesting one about the wage structure, because he's not even the highest earner, is Bruno. He isn't. We don't care about the wage structure. We need to be going for the top talent. We need to give Bruno a new contract and higher wages. We certainly need to be doing that, because the fact he's not even at the top earner, I believe the top earner is Kieran Trippier. And Kieran Trippier's been amazing, let's be honest. I've got some stats about the Brentford game where even Kieran Trippier matches Bruno Guimaraes, and that just shows where he's at. But I think you have to break the bank a little bit. I think you've got to change the wage structure a little bit in terms of wanting to make him the most important player. I know Alexander Isak, was a lot of money. Obviously, he's broke our transfer record in terms of him, and he has potential. But even though Bruno is only a couple of years older, he seems to be so far ahead of the rest and so far ahead of in terms of potential right now. And Newcastle have got a gem. Obviously, there's mentions with Manchester City as well. There's obviously a lot of people mentioning Manchester City, and we'll touch on that back in a minute. So I'll touch on Craig's point in a minute. But going on to that Sky Sports graphic, Roy Keane, I know Roy Keane's not liked by Newcastle fans. I certainly don't like him, former Sunderland manager. But in terms of his footballing ability, you can't say he hasn't done it in a Manchester United shirt in terms of winning Premier Leagues, Champions Leagues, FA Cups, the list goes on. And you talk about football intelligence. Now, I think one of the examples I would give in terms of football intelligence with Bruno Guimaraes is that he knows he's going to have two people up his backside. He knows that it's going to be very, very difficult in terms of, where's that next pass coming? How, there's going to be, I remember the first couple of games, it was man on in terms of the whole crowd just telling him or letting him know. They don't do that anymore because there's that trust. And that comes back from the football intelligence. The little flick over the Brentford midfielder was a lovely, lovely bit of skill. And that just shows he knows his surroundings. I think there was a comment where made about David Silva when Man City beat Man United. It was that he had wing mirrors. He knew where everything is. He had like 3D vision, if you like, or X-ray vision. He could see everything over his shoulders. And that just shows the intelligence of the player. And the one thing that Roy Keane mentioned with the football intelligence is that he's always looking to go forward. He's always looking to find that pass. And that comes back to the graph which I'll mention in a few minutes. But I think that's really, really important. So we haven't had many of these players at Newcastle where they have so much football intelligence. We've had the likes of John Joe Shelby and Joe Linton, who have been very, very good. Joe Willock over the last couple of years as well, have been very, very good. I just don't think we've seen this sort of player for a long, long time at Newcastle United. I know there's comparisons with the likes of Rob Lee, who was a fantastic servant for Newcastle United, but I just don't think we've seen anybody better. Rob Lee, Johan Cabaye, the only two I can really think at the top of my head that can really do something like this. So it's going to be really, really interesting. Let's talk about Craig's point in regards to Manchester City. He says, in the likes of Manchester City, Real Madrid, Bruno would be another top player. Here he is, the star and worship. As long as the project doesn't stall, why would he leave? I think that last point is very, very important. As long as the project doesn't stall. The project doesn't stall, brilliant. Honestly, absolutely brilliant. For a fact, then Bruno will stay and other players, big players, will come. It's just whether the project keeps going. I do like the point with the Real Madrid one. I think Manchester City is slightly different in terms of, we've seen how Haaland's loved at the minute. I know Man City fan base can't touch Newcastle's fan base. I get that. Newcastle's fan base is far better than Manchester City's, but Real Madrid, I do take that point. He could just be another player. Real Madrid have seen so many good players over the last few decades, or 5-6 decades. He would just be another player. They sometimes didn't take to Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo scored so many goals. He's Real Madrid's highest ever goal scorer. There's been other players as well, and you just think, wow, that's absolutely incredible. It really, really is. Mental, let's be honest, absolutely honest. But it is going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to that as well. Andrew, good evening to you. Yeah, good thing is it forces keep spending to progress, or he would consider leaving. Now, how much money can Newcastle spend without breaking any FFP rules and getting towards the top? That's another big thing. I've seen the likes of James Maddison, Moussa Diarra, etc., being heavily linked in the last 24, 48 hours. If Newcastle are in a strong position in January, by January, they might spend a little bit more money. James Maddison, for me, would be a fantastic addition, and you can fit him in. You can fit him in this team as well. People are saying, "Oh, can you get him in if Bruno goes a little bit further forward?" You can. There's certainly means and ways about that. It just means Newcastle are a little bit more attacking minded, but the creativity that Maddison would bring, that's probably a separate video altogether. The argument is, according to Fishing Rods, is that unsettles the dressing room. But what player wants to lose Bruno? Pay him more. How much would you pay Bruno Guimaraes a week? If he says on, let's just say Kieran Trippier is the highest earner on 100 grand a week, or 120 grand a week roughly. Say Bruno's on 100 grand a week right now. Do you double his wages? Do you put a 250,000? I know money's not an object, but in terms of the actual ownership, but how much do you think we should give Bruno a week? Let's be honest, and then let's see how that wage structure compares to Alexander Isak, Sven Botman. Let's think off the top of my head. Callum Wilson to a lesser extent, because I know he's a little bit older, but he's just signed a new 4-year deal as well. How much is he on? Is he towards the highest earners? That'll be interesting to see what happens with there. Jay, as he's talking about financial fair play, it's in the club's interest to max out this year, as it's the last under the looser financial fair play regulations. It gets tighter year by year from here. So how much could Newcastle spend? Could they spend £200 million in the next, say, 2 windows? Let's go crazy a little bit. And then pretend that's what we always use in terms of money. And then if that's the case, then brilliant. But why aren't other clubs doing that? Who are competing potentially? Why didn't like, say, Arsenal, Spurs, Man City go absolutely crazy? I know they spent in certain positions, but they didn't. Arsenal didn't spend £90 million on a player. I know Man United did, but Man United lost players as well, so they kind of counteract that. They didn't go absolutely crazy. So I think it just really depends how much money Newcastle actually can spend to see what happens. Obviously, Sam's not very well. I don't know if Sam's very well, but everywhere they're saying get well soon, Sam. I know his missus and his little one's not very well, so big shout out to him as well. Let's give him a little bit of limelight. Why not? Why not with his missus there not being very well? Sam says he's the best midfielder I've ever seen play for Newcastle. That is a big statement. Called it last season after he was only with us for a handful of games, which was risky, but every time he's on the pitch, he proves me right. You don't want to prove Sam Nolan wrong, do you? You really don't, because he'll just mention it every time on Newcastle fans TV as well. Let's go back into what in terms of the graph, and we'll go one by one. Most tackles per 90 minutes, Bruno Guimaraes is top. 4 tackles every 90 minutes. Tough tackling you don't really associate with Brazilian midfielders, but Bruno Guimaraes certainly is that. Now, I don't know if this is classed as a tackle or whatever, but when he wins the ball back after there's loads of pressure in terms of that Brentford game, you just think, wow, that's the work rate. 4 players surrounding him, the referee didn't bottle it and give a foul or anything like that, and then he drives forward and we know what happens next. He carries the ball. That's what I love. I love midfielders carrying the ball for Newcastle. And Joe Willock does this as well. I'm not just saying Bruno Guimaraes can do this, but Joe Willock does this as well. I really like midfielders that think, right, what's the first thing I do? We've seen it last year under Steve Bruce, where it was just, we'll play it backwards to our centre-halves, Federico Fernandez and Jamal Lascelles, not just singling them out in particular. And then it go to the right back, and then it would come back to the centre-half, and then it go to the goalkeeper, and it was just boring. Go and make risky runs, if you like. If you lose the ball, Newcastle fans, yes, might grumble, but they're not going to grumble if you keep on doing it, because you go into attack. You're going to go forward. What I don't like is pointless possession. I hate pointless possession. I think it's ridiculous. What's the point of just passing it around the centre half? I could do that for 90 minutes. Newcastle ain't winning a game. Simple as that. So that's the big thing for me, as well as obviously when you run and carry the ball forward, you're going to create more chances. He creates 2.1 chances a game. 2.1 chances a game. That's, again, another big thing in terms of Newcastle United and going forward and getting more goals. We've scored 9 goals in the last 2 games. Bruno has played part of that because he's bringing the ball forward. Joe Willock does as well, as we've mentioned, and that is massive. The fact that in terms of central midfield, he is the most consistent and the best at doing that in terms of chances created is a huge advantage when you have someone like him in the team. Samantha's saying in the comments as well, get a few more comments in. Again, if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. People are buying from the club and ground now under that greedy cockney. People stopped with the rise after the take we were able to go worldwide. Hopefully we do that. I think that again comes with sponsorships as well. Andrew Bell says Botman could also be the best player we've seen as centre half, but time will tell. Early signs, but we'll see what happens with that one. Sven Botman's a Rolls Royce. Let's be honest. I like to see him. Let's see what he's like against the creme de la creme. Man City scored 3 and Haaland only scored 1. But you thought Sven Botman had a good game. That's the crazy things. Is the crazy things when you look at something like that. Let's get some more comments in as well. Just look at the progression we've shown 1 year. The fact we're only going to do this is better. This is fantastic. It is. If we can get more Bruno Guimaraes over there next few years, then we'll just go, Bruno's just another one. But look, it's going to be interesting to say the least. Caseboy UK, a very good midfielder, but as good as Cabaye? I think obviously Cabaye's done more than Newcastle shirt because obviously he was there longer. I just think if you look at Cabaye and Bruno in particular, Cabaye had that fantastic, almost like quarterback role bit with what we've seen with John Joe Shea, where he floats the ball completely to a different other side of the pitch. And, it was fantastic to see. He had a free kick in his locker, which we haven't seen Bruno really take a free kick for Newcastle, so we can't really judge him on that, but he did have that, and they started to, in Kabai's fairness, I just think when you look at the team that Bruno was in to start with, and you look at Newcastle's best team at Cabai, when I'm looking towards the back end of 2011-12, Bruno would make that even better. If we only allow one player between Cabai and Bruno in that 2011-12 team, I think Bruno gets us even more, and that's probably a big statement when you think about it. But it is interesting because Johan Cabai in this team, would he have the same impact? I don't think he will. I don't think Johan Cabai at his best has the same impact that Bruno Guimaraes has right now, and we're not even at Bruno's best. As I mentioned, Bruno's probably got another 4 or 5 years until he reaches his potential. That just shows where we're at right now in terms of Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle United. Let's move on to the next, in terms of the chart that you would have seen on Sky Sports. I haven't got the chart on me, so I do apologise. But through balls, 1.1 through ball every single game. Now, in terms of per 90 minutes, which it's again more than anybody, and we've seen the best midfielders in the Premier League. Some credible midfielders in the Premier League, and Bruno's the top of that list. Again, the only thing that he's second in is possession won, and Declan Rice has again been doing that for years and years and years. He's the one that's first, and Bruno is second. So, and like I say, Declan Rice has done exceptionally well for West Ham. He's going to do well for England in the World Cup. Fingers crossed. But I like the through ball one. I love attacking football, and for me, one of the best players in that we've seen do that for Newcastle, over the years. I think I remember Gary Speed playing some lovely through balls towards Alan Shearer. I can think of the Charlton game, but Bruno just seems to find a ball that I can't even see, and I feel like I do know me bits and bobs about football. But there's certainly times, and I don't know if any other Newcastle fan feels that at St James's Park or wherever you're watching around the world, you just think, what have we got on our hands here? Like, we're just blessed to be in the presence of someone that good. But the balls that we see in terms of going towards Callum Wilson and St. Maximin, whoever, it's eye of a needle. They're not like easy passes, the difficult passes in which he seems to find. And it's difficult because there's only 1.1 this season. It's not the whole of last season where from when he made his first game in February. But I do think that it does show for what it's going to be now to the end of the season. It really, really is important, because when Bruno's not on the pitch, the only person that I do see that has that pass in his locker occasionally is Sean Longstaff. And I know he gets a lot of criticism at times, some of it unjust. But Sean Longstaff does have that pass in him where he can, look at the Isak goal, for example. It was a fantastic little through ball, and it was quite close, but it took the local defender out and Isak did the rest. Longstaff does have that, but in terms of consistency and always getting the right pass, Bruno is ahead of him quite comfortably. But if Sean Longstaff keeps on training with Bruno Guimaraes, we'll certainly see a better Sean Longstaff. I've seen Cabai and Twitter were absolutely awesome for us by Caseball. Cabai couldn't lace Bruno's boots, says Fishing Rods. Again, it is going to be really, really interesting to see what other people think. We've got Bruno as the best central midfielder in the Premier League. So I wonder who this is. Get in the comments who you think is running Newcastle Fans TV behind the scenes. Sam also wanted the Forest left back ahead of Matt Targett. He really did. I'd rather have Targett for sure. Sam's gone on the debate in regards to Cabai. He says the only thing Cabai has on Bruno is the dead ball ability. In every other aspect, Bruno is miles and 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 miles ahead. Again, but we haven't seen Bruno take a free kick properly. We might see that in the future. Samantha says Bruno is magic. We all know Bruno's magic. Beardsley was the wizard. I like that. I like that, Samantha. That's probably the comment of the day so far. I do think that's very, very good. We were talking about Botman before. I know this is mainly about Bruno, but we'll mention about Botman. Botman locked up Haaland. Haaland was constantly forced to pass. That's all I'm going to say about Botman. Haaland did have 2 very good chances that day, and it was Nick Pope made a wonderful save in the second half. You remember, and then there was the one-on-one where Haaland came out, spread himself, Nick Pope. So he did have these moments, but I do take what you mean by that. I don't think when you look at how good Haaland's been, Botman certainly did pretty well against him, and he only scored 1 and could have scored a hat-trick. But it's absolutely interesting to see what happened. let's have a look at some more comments before I talk a little bit more about Bruno Guimaraes as well. Paul's saying, very good evening. I tapped you on the arm at Shears Bounce that before. Can film me? I'm not sure your name yet. Well, nice to meet you, Paul. I can't really remember that, to be honest with you. I had a couple of drinks that day, which you might have seen in the videos. But this is interesting. I got some interesting stats with Bruno Guimaraes. And Jamie Carragher mentioned in Sky yesterday about under pressure passes. We talked about it before, where people are right up his backside. He's only behind 3 players in the Premier League. See if you can tell us in the comments who those 3 players are. So he's 4th on the list with 86%. So like an opponent within 2 meters. So again, 2 meters, say 2 or 3 yards. Joe Willock was 5th. And people, I think Joe Willock's been brilliant since the start of the season. I know Harry disagrees because Harry just doesn't know anything about Newcastle United. Good evening to you, Harry. But 84% for Joe Willock. But I think that's incredible. And we've obviously given Bruno all this plaudits, but Willock's only 2% worse off so far this season. It's incredible. And I'll give you a clue. The 3 players that are above Bruno Guimaraes right now are playing Champions League football and are very, very good players. I'll put it like that to you. So that's a sort of competition that Bruno Guimaraes has at Newcastle United. I know a lot of people are talking about the Manchester United game. We've got one of them. Is it Myerg? One of them is Rodri. He's joint first with 89%. There's another Manchester City player in there. You'll not be surprised. And there's another Champions League player in there. Fishing Rods has said Willock has been excellent the last few games. He's been excellent all season. Give him the credit he deserves. In my particular opinion, I think Bruno Guimaraes, of course, he walks into this midfield. Joe Willock, for me, is the second best midfielder at Newcastle United right now in that 3. If we're going at 3 at the back, 3 midfield, Joe Willock is the second best on form right now. Anybody disagree? Let us know in the comments. Again, like this video. That would be greatly appreciated as well. Willock is desperate for a goal. He probably could have scored about 3 already so far this season. It is not Kevin De Bruyne, believe it or not. Not Kevin De Bruyne. I know a lot of people say it's got to be Kevin De Bruyne, but it isn't, believe it or not. It is another Manchester City player who actually had a wonderful game against Newcastle. He really, really did. I've always thought he's, probably one of Manchester City's better players. But again, he maybe played a part. Maybe played a part in one of the goals. That's your clue. Bruno, Joey, and Shelby would be an interesting middle 3 for me with Willock pushed further up. That said, it would be difficult to include Maxi and Almiron. Good problems to have. It is, Paul. Good problems to have. Everyone will say their favourite 3. For me, if you want to know my favourite 3 right now, it would be probably Bruno, Joe Willock. I'm torn between Joe Linton and Sean Longstaff. I would just about go with Joe Linton, but only just. It would be really, really interesting. I thought Sean's been brilliant last 2 games as well. Eddie Howe makes the big decisions. He makes the big decisions. So, I'd just about go Joe Linton. I think we saw something with Joe Linton on Saturday, which I just don't think Sean Longstaff has in his locker right now. But yeah, only just. But if Sean plays on Sunday, I'm not disappointed at all. He's been brilliant so far. It is Bernardo Silva, by the way, for all the other Manchester City players out there. Manchester City, the 2 players that we mentioned in terms of the top 3, both on 89%, Bernardo Silva and Rodri. He didn't get the other one. Reece James, England national, playing for Chelsea, 87%. So incredible. 86% Bruno, 87% Reece James, 89% for Bernardo and Rodri. So it just shows the sort of company that Bruno Guimaraes is has at the very, very top. Caseball has a question. I don't mind answering questions. I know I ask a lot of questions, but this is a question that he's got. Do you think Bruno plays better with Longstaff rather than Joe Linton as he gets a lot higher up the pitch? Very good question. I think we've seen both in terms of Bruno with Joe Linton and Sean Longstaff. I think Bruno brings the best out of both of them, which shows how well they've improved in the last, say, 12 months. In terms of actually who gets the best out of Bruno, it's a really good question. I think if you look at Bruno's best games, probably Sean Longstaff, if we're being honest. But I think the general team is probably Joe Linton probably should be on, just in terms of the general team. And the reason why I say that is because Joe Linton will do a lot of the dirty work, which I think Bruno doesn't mind doing. But if we want Bruno attacking more, Joe Linton's not too bothered about staying back a little bit. I think Sean Longstaff certainly has improved attacking wise with Bruno on the pitch. But again, how many times do we see Sean Longstaff go forward with the ball now? Where he was always going a bit more sideways, and we're just thinking, oh, come on, believe in yourself a little bit. But it really, really is an interesting question. Get your comments in on that question. I think it's a really, really good question. I've seen some people saying Big Joe has a better engine. How do you fit in Isaac? Again, that's another big question. I think that's another video. Let's see. Is there anything else I haven't mentioned? The Brentford game. This shows how good Bruno was in the Brentford game. Since his debut in February, this is the stats I've managed to find. No one has scored more goals than Bruno in midfield since he arrived in Newcastle, and since his first appearance, he has scored 7 goals for Newcastle since February. And this is a guy that doesn't score a lot. We did an interview with Olivier Bernard, me and Sam on the Green and Mullen show, which make sure you give that a listen to. He mentioned about Lucas Paquetá, who was obviously at West Ham. He was heavily linked, with Newcastle, but there was never real concrete interest if you believe the likes of Sky Sports. And Paquetá was Bruno, but with 10 goals a season. Bruno's already scored 7 so far, and he's not even been here a whole season. If you want to look at it like that, I know there's been a gap in terms of the end of the season, but he is absolutely brilliant. 43 accurate passes against Brentford, more than anybody on the pitch on the Saturday as well. And there was Bruno. This is another amazing stat. No player on either side won possession more than Bruno Guimarares against Brentford. Again, that is absolutely brilliant from a Newcastle fan point of view. Bruno is world class. Again, I'll have to mention One Football. One Football will have all the stats on Bruno Guimaraes as well. There's all the stats I've managed to get off on One Football, so make sure you press the link in the description for that. There's some brilliant stuff. Obviously, Champions League is on as well live, and we've also got the Europa League and Premier League's back over this at the weekend. So Man United Newcastle, make sure you press One Football. Link will be in the description for that. Bruno Guimaraes gets the best out of other players. I think you look at Miguel Almiron, some of the passes that he's received from Bruno. Look at the Crystal Palace game from last season. The little dink. Like, if anyone that plays golf, Bruno's ball to Miggy at Fulham last week was like a lob wedge. Just a nice little up and down, and Miggy on the volley. We've seen what happens there. So you certainly get the best out of Miguel Almiron. I would love to see Bruno and ASM play more together. I know ASM's had injuries, and I know Bruno's played only been here since February, but I think it'd be mint to see them for a longer period of time. I know they're only going to get about, say, 5-6 games until the World Cup, but if you get a fit Bruno and a fit ASM with a fit Callum Wilson from January to the end of the season, I'm putting it out there. Newcastle are either in Europe or Newcastle make a cup final, whether that be the League Cup or the FA Cup. That's how confident I am with them 3 players that are fit all season. Because Callum Wilson was quiet on Saturday, still could have scored. He was a bit unlucky not to. ASM played 15-20 minutes and looked okay. He wasn't completely, ASM, but he only played 15-20 minutes. And Bruno's only just kind of getting back into form. This is going to be interesting. Aaron, we've just spoken about the best 3 in midfield. If you want my 3, it is Bruno, Joe Linton, and Willock for me right now. I know John Joe Shelby. But yeah, I've not even mentioned John Joe Shelby, and he's been brilliant. He's brilliant for Newcastle, but for me, Willock's been brilliant so far this season. At the minute, you don't drop Bruno, obviously. You don't drop Joe Willock, in my opinion. Tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. We've got some more comments as well. You hit the nail on the head. The belief in the team's obvious. Just need Maxi fully fit with everyone encouraging him, and we could be in for an amazing season. Could you imagine Newcastle in the FA Cup final, FA Cup semi-final at Wembley? I think Newcastle can do it if they keep their best players fit, and just, with Eddie Howe as manager, that's a big thing, I think, as well. Eddie Howe's got the best out of Bruno. He's improving Bruno. Scoring with his head. He never got to score with. He never scored any headers before he came to Newcastle. Scored 2 already. The winner against Leicester, and then the first goal of Brentford on Saturday. That's a big one for me as well. He's improving these players. He knows he can get more out of Bruno. He knows how to manage him. He didn't play him to start off, just to kind of let him watch Premier League football, if you like. played a few cameo minutes against Everton, and where he just ran the clock down. Villa, you got that foul towards the end, which won us the game essentially in terms of just wasting time, kick the ball up a bit further, and Newcastle held on for all 3 points. But look, it'd be really, really interesting to see what happens. I'd take the top 10 and a cup this season. I'll be overjoyed, says Graham. Darren says Bruno is the best midfielder Newcastle have ever had. Wow, Darren, I don't know how old you are, but if you're in your 50s or your 40s, that's an interesting one. Lee says Sky are asking, is Bruno the best midfielder or the best central midfielder in the league? Interesting question is all I'm going to say on that matter. The problem for Real Madrid is that they're not in the Premier League, says Tony. That's probably the only advantage for Newcastle have, really, if we're honest. Real Madrid are the biggest club in the world, in my opinion. But of course, they're in a different country. We all know that. So they're not going to be playing in the Premier League. But the Premier League is the best league. It's the most competitive league. You win the Premier League, it's almost more like a badge of honour than any other league. If you win League One, well, brilliant. If you play for PSG, if you don't play for PSG and we win League One, fantastic. If you win La Liga, if you're Real Madrid or Barcelona, you're always going to be in contention. It's a big competition. But to win the Premier League, you've seen Liverpool pretty much almost stay unbeaten for a whole season and miss out on the league by a point in 2 of the last 4 seasons or something stupid like that. We've seen Liverpool pretty much have to go and win 32 games or something, and they've lost 2 or something. They pretty much had to be like a winning machine until COVID came. So that tells you how difficult it is right now. As well, my hope for Paul, this is what Paul said as well in the comments, and my hope is we gain as many points and places before the World Cup. I think that's just natural, because we want to do that. We want to win as many games as possible. We want to gain, we want to get the points going. How nice is it that we've not had to mention relegation really once this season? We've not had to mention the relegation zone. Newcastle are miles ahead. That's the big thing as well. So yeah, I think Newcastle is certainly in the right place at the minute. It's just nice to see. It's just nice to see. Last thing about Bruno before we end this video. We'll talk about the fact that I think he could play for pretty much any team in the Premier League, and I mentioned Manchester City as well. Does he play for Brazil right now? Does he play in Brazil's best midfield? But I don't watch a lot of international football. Like I try to watch England when I can. But does he start in Brazil's World Cup? Because I generally don't know, and I would be really interested, because the reason why I would be interested is because how many games is he going to play for Brazil? Say if Brazil get to the minimum quarterfinals before they get tested. If Bruno plays a lot of those games, you don't want him picking up an injury. That's the only thing. That's the only thing, in my opinion. That's my only issue with Bruno, in terms of if he plays, if he plays loads of games in the World Cup, it's going to be interesting, in my particular opinion. Samantha, so we'll get the last few comments in before we'll wrap things up. Darren Waller, Peter Beattie first, Bruno second, in my opinion, in terms of the best midfielder ever. I think you will replace Willock for Maddison. That would be an interesting one. God, I couldn't imagine that at the minute, but I think Willock's been that good. Has he been better than Maddison this season so far? Probably not in terms of stats, but it's going to be really, really interesting to say the least. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people. Fred will start. Fred for Man United. Man United's Fred will start. Casemiro potentially, says Caseball. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of national football, as I mentioned, but if Bruno doesn't start for Brazil must have the best midfielder known to man. So, but I think they're the favourites to win the World Cup. So there's certainly going to be it's going to be interesting to say the least. Bruno is number 1 for me, says Darren Waller as well, in terms of Newcastle's best ever midfielders. And we've had the likes of, say, Rob Lee, Peter Beattie, Owen Kabay, Gary Speed, God rest his soul. I like Lee. Even Lee Clark was a great serve for Newcastle. Maybe not in that sort of caliber, but Beardsley was absolutely unbelievable. I hope he makes the Brazil bench, says Aaron, and doesn't start on the game. From a biased Newcastle fan point of view, I do not hope Bruno Guimaraes plays any minutes for Brazil. You can go to the World Cup, you can watch the World Cup, You know, but if he doesn't play any minutes for Brazil, I'll not be devastated. I know he'd personally be devastated because I know how much he wants to play for Brazil. But yeah, from a biased Newcastle fan, I don't think so. Gaza. What about Gaza? I don't think we saw the best of Gaza at Newcastle. Then he was at Tottenham and Rangers and Lazio and God knows who else. Middlesbrough he was at. Well, Middlesbrough towards the end, but obviously he obviously did incredible. Clarence Acuna, says Sam in the comments. Clarence Acuna, we're talking about him there. I was talking about him on Saturday when I was in Wonderbar. Wonderbar, great bar, by the way, for before the match. If you want a couple of beers and good songs, Mad Mick and everything, make sure you give that a look as well if you're in the area for the next home game, which is Everton next Wednesday. And James has finally buy Suachek from West Ham United. Very, very good player. Very, very good player. I do like him, but I don't think he's what Newcastle need right now, but I think he's a very, very good midfielder, to say the very least. But yeah, that's it for me tonight in terms of Bruno Guimaraes. And, you know, get your comments in. You know, where would you say Bruno? Where does Bruno rank in terms of Newcastle's best ever players for Newcastle? If you're looking for the first 12 months, is he the best player in terms of what Newcastle fans have seen in the last 12 months? And in terms of an impact, everyone will mention the likes of, Pape Cisse for when he first started in terms of goals. But in terms of central midfield, is Bruno the best we've seen in terms of the biggest impact so far? He's only been here 8 or 9 months. God knows what he could be like. And God knows what Newcastle United could have in the next 2 to 3 years if Bruno stays fit and Bruno is in a black and white shirt. We don't want him to go to Real Madrid. I know it's the biggest club in the world, but can Newcastle keep hold of that? Put that in the comments as well. We've got some fantastic stuff on Newcastle Fans TV this week. We've got an interview with Christian Atsu, which is coming out later this week. We've also got reaction to the women's game against Durham tomorrow. Lee will definitely be there. Beth might be there. We'll see what happens with that. We'll have a live preview as well this week for the Manchester United game. Can Newcastle United win at Old Trafford for the second time in the Premier League? Quickly get in the comments. You've got about a minute to get in the comments. Who scored for Newcastle when they beat Manchester United in the Premier League? It was about 9 years ago. So if you can get in the comments, it was actually a Newcastle midfielder we've been talking about a lot today as well. But we've also got build-up going into the game. Sam's at the Savannah Marshall fight. He'll be having a video out there as well. And then it's game day. Manchester United on Sunday. Can Newcastle United continue their good form? Or will it be ended by Erik ten Hag's Manchester United? Will Cristiano Ronaldo, make an impact? Hopefully he won't. Our case balls on it. Johan Cabaye, well done, son. Well done. Johan Cabaye it was with that winner at Old Trafford in the yellow kit, the yellow Wonga kit. I was there that day. It was the best away game I've ever been to in my Newcastle fan life. But yeah, that is the end of today's video. Big thanks to all of you in the comments below. Again, we've got loads of videos, as I've mentioned, but it is Manchester United on Sunday. Make sure you listen and watch all the previews and videos here on Newcastle Fans TV. Like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you all very soon.